Welcome to the Significance of Wealth podcast, where we explore the evolving landscape of wealth management, private investments, and collecting as both a passion and potential investment strategy. In each episode, host Tom Ruggie, founder and CEO of Destiny Family Office, discusses these topics with industry experts, providing insights into the unique challenges and opportunities associated with managing significant assets. I'm Marty Salt, and in today's episode, Tom is joined by guest Daniel Sedwick, president of Daniel Frank Sedwick Auction House. As the world's leading specialist in colonial coinage of Spanish America, shipwreck coins, and maritime artifacts, Daniel brings a wealth of knowledge in the world of rare collectibles. His auction house is celebrated for its expertise in treasure coins and historical artifacts from around the globe. Daniel and Tom will discuss how these rare treasures can serve not only as investments, but also as tangible connections to our past. Now let's dive into the world of treasure coins and artifacts with Tom Ruggie and Daniel Sedwick as they further explore the significance of wealth.
Well, good afternoon, Dan. It is a pleasure to have you here on our podcast with us, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine.
Yeah, awesome. So we go back, I guess, a little bit over a year now. I actually met you through your wife, Lynn, who is an accountant for RSM here locally in Central Florida. And we got talking about, we initially were talking about our family office business and tax planning and that sort of thing. And I started talking about how I've gotten pretty entrenched in the collectibles world. And then she started just bragging about you for the next 20 or 30 minutes and what you were doing. And you know, your background is in coins, but you've got a couple auctions that you run that focus on not only coins, but in particular, I think shipwreck articles. And why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, as you say, my basis is coins. I'm what is known as a professional numismatist. That's the term for somebody who studies or works with coins, rare coins. But my background is that I worked with my father since the 1980s, and he had studied one particular type of coin and pioneered an area that the coins happened to come mostly from a shipwreck or from shipwrecks. And so that tie-in kind of branched off from there. I probably did more than he ever did. Well, certainly more than my father ever did in terms of developing a market specifically for shipwreck coins. And then artifacts developed from there. And by artifacts, we mean anything that's not a coin, basically, except for ingots. That's another thing, which are just, as it sounds like, they're just raw gold or silver that was formed in its time to be shipped as bullion and not as coins. So those really are the three main things. And I started an auction business for these things in 2008, and we've not looked back.
Okay, so the auctions is something that you started after getting involved with your dad. That's something that you kind of pioneered the way on, if you will.
Correct.
Yeah, and you do what, 2 a year, correct?
Yeah, every now and then we throw in a third auction in the summer for special collections or something, but we would like to do more, but it's a very small business, and not to say that the material we have is small, but just that we're only 6 people in my office, and only so much we can do. But
right.
It seems to be pretty well received to have 2 auctions a year. That's enough to keep people interested and energized and something to look forward to.
Well, plus I would assume that gathering the materials, because this isn't like sports cards like I'm involved with that are all over the place. I mean, you're gathering materials for a very specific niche item for your auction. So I think it seems like it'd be difficult to do a lot more than 2 a year anyways.
Yeah, that's true. That's always the hardest part. My partner, I was just talking about with this auction, how, we spent half a year going all over the world, literally, and meeting people, going to conferences, making connections, and everything just leads to one event. If we were to try to do that more than twice a year, it would be pretty difficult. But yeah, I suppose if you have a lot of employees, that's the case. But as you imply, the material is a bit diffuse, and you have to do it correctly. It's if we just left it up to chance and ran at auction whatever happened to come our way, it would be a very different auction. When I started out, it was more of a wholesale venue for that very reason. And now we massage our auctions quite a bit. I mean, we reject a lot of material just because it's not the right quality, they're not the right price point, or not clean enough to be blunt about it.
Yeah. And it sounds like you have a lot of great materials for this upcoming auction. So we'd love to hear more about maybe some of the highlights. And, another question that I personally had for you is whether it's this auction or a previous auction, but is there one or two particular pieces that you've been just, super excited about having? And then actually a follow-up question to that is, kind of what's the holy grail of what you would really love to have at an auction, either now or in the future?
Sure. Well, every auction that we run has trophies in it that are just really showstoppers that we're very proud to have, very happy to have. Mostly shipwreck stuff, but then a lot that are just general coin things. What's developed in all of what we do is a big following in Latin American coins. It's an offshoot of the fact that a lot of shipwrecks are Spanish, and a lot of the material Spanish colonial, and all of these Spanish colonies have become what we call Latin America now. So all of these countries, whether it's Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, anyone you want to name, they have their own coinage afterward, and they have their own trophies. And when I say trophy, I mean something that was made in such a small quantity that collectors really have to fight to get one in their collection. Specifically this time, it's really hard to narrow things down. We have a little collection of gold bars that's very interesting. A couple that we have one very odd for us, but it's from a Chinese wreck. It's a Chinese gold bar. I have a lot of imported Chinese coins, 5-figure Chinese coins this time. I wouldn't say that there's any one particular item. I would say it's collections. We have a couple of Colombian collections, a Cuban collection, a Peruvian collection, and each one of these things, like I say, has its own trophy. In artifacts, though, we have fossils this time for whatever reason. Some very interesting fossils, a whole crocodile skull from, I don't know, millions and millions of years ago. Just a lot of fun things. And really, you never know with any auction. To answer your other question, I've been thinking about this. There's well, let me back up a little bit. Years ago, we had the honor of selling what has turned out to be the most valuable Mexican silver coin of all time. It is an example. There are only 3 known, and it's an example of the first dollar-sized coin that was made in Mexico. And this is all the way in 1538. I mean, it's not anything like you'd expect a dollar now, or even, modern in any sense, but it was what the Spanish first made in Mexico when they started up the mint in terms of a dollar-sized coin. And that's kind of a benchmark for collectors. There are all kinds of denominations, just like you might have quarters, nickels, pennies in your pocket, but the one that the collectors all want more than anything else is the biggest coin. And in silver, that would be $1. So a number of years ago, not long after we started the auctions, we sold one for over $600,000. Well, now we are involved in a coin that has established the record for the most valuable Mexican gold coin now.
Wow.
Again,
congratulations.
We bought it in a Spanish auction on behalf of a client. I actually have, I don't know if you can tell real well, but that's the coin. It's a round gold coin. And
how old is that coin?
It's from 1750, and that is the date of it. And it is actually from the 1715 fleet, which is off the east coast of Florida. So it's a very important shipwreck coin, just like the first dollar of Mexico was a shipwreck coin as well. So it's kind of like for generations, people treated shipwreck coins as, well, those are the corroded examples. If you're a serious collector, you're not really into those. I'm talking about, 1900s and before. In recent times, people have realized if you want the really best stuff, you have to go to shipwrecks. And that's where I've come in. And like I say, we've established now 2 records, both in silver and gold. Shipwreck stuff is important now, and people realize that.
Yeah.
But as I say, with the gold coin, we acquired it for a client. My goal is that someday I will sell that coin in my own auction, and it will sell for over $1 million.
Nice. And you mentioned the gold bars. So how big are the gold bars? And I'm sure you have a range of where you think they'll end up selling.
Yeah. I might have to do a little homework here and see exactly. But the gold bars that we have are from, like I said, we have the one from the Chinese shipwreck, and then we have one from we have 2 from the 1715 fleet. There's that magical Spanish fleet off Florida again. One of those is an actual bar, like you would think of a rectangular ingot with markings. The other one is actually a wedge cut of a disc. And if you excuse me for 1 second, I'll go ahead and look on here and give you some specifics as to their values. But they're pretty heavy. If generally speaking, if they were going to make an ingot like these things, they weren't going to waste their time on little pieces. They were going to make good size ingots. And now what happened from there, interestingly enough, is because there was a shortage of gold coins at the time, a lot of times you see these ingots cut into little pieces. Those are small. We have some of those as well. But the full big bars, those are what's most interesting. The 1715 fleet bar that we have is 915 grams, and it is about a little over 5 inches long, and that has an estimate of $60,000 and up. The quarter cut of a disc that I was talking about, that's 952 grams. So we're talking about almost a kilo of gold on these things. That is about 4 inches. The interesting thing about that piece is that it is marked only with the fineness, which is 13 1/4 carat. So that's a pretty low fineness. And we've seen this before with one particular wreck of the 1715 fleet. For whatever reason, there were these minimally marked bars in low fineness, and most of them were big discs too. So we're not sure what the relationship is. Could be they were older pieces that were being held back and then shipped, or maybe they were contraband. But there has to be some reason behind why they were lower carat. When you go back far enough, and we have an example in this auction, we get these bars from a 1500s wreck that we call Tumbaga. This was at a time when the conquest was happening, and they were just taking artifacts from the natives, melting them down and quickly sending them back to Spain. They did a quick assay to see approximately what the fineness was, but they were not refining the bars. They were not, or the silver or the gold. So you get some very weird finenesses. And like I say, we have one of the silver Tumbaga bars in this auction, and they're nowhere near the level that you see in the later years. We also have, speaking of silver, we have a gold bar from the Atocha, but we also have 3 big silver bars. These are 1,000-ounce loaves of silver.
Wow.
And those are
that's from the Atocha as well.
Yeah. Well, the Atocha gold bar we have, which is about half a kilo, that's $35,000, and the silver bars I'm talking about, those are $25,000-$30,000 each. And those are low estimates.
Yeah, no, that's pretty exciting. So, when it does. So, when I think about sunken treasures, and I'm a novice here. I bought a few things at your auction last year, and this has always interested me personally. So I bought a couple of little trinkets over the years, but I still always, like, where I go to is the Titanic, and are there anything that's publicly sold from that, obviously major shipwreck and very popular, well-known shipwreck, in part, I'm sure, thanks to the movie, but.
Yeah, no, the short answer is yes. We have in stock, not in our auction, some little bits of coal that were marketed a number of years ago. And I think there may be some other things out there as well, but what you have to, this kind of leads into another important question. What you have to watch out for, because provenance is so important on these things and makes such a difference, it's got to be very clean. It has to have a very there has to be a good paper trail going all the way back to the salvage, showing that that's, it was officially salvaged. It went through proper government channels and divisions, and it's legal to own. And most important, it is what we say it is.
Yeah.
So it's gotten to the point where any shipwreck stuff we sell has that clean provenance.
Yeah. So, and that actually segues into something I wanted to talk about, which is, in part, where does the sourcing come from, but then also what is the process of verification and provenance, because that is obviously extremely important.
Yeah, and like I say, it's gotten to be a big issue, because it used to be that, particularly starting in the 60s, when in 70s, when you see scuba diving take off, people would just go out and they'd know where a shipwreck was, and they'd say, "Oh, look what I found," and keep it in their house. And years later, they'd sell it, and, "Oh, he said, she said, this came from wherever." That doesn't really fly anymore. And it's kind of unfortunate, because so much was found in way back when that's legitimate. But the real value today is in having, like I say, a clean paper trail. And the way that happens is that the legitimate salvage efforts that are out there now, or have been, are usually under contract with a local government. For example, here in the state of Florida, the divers on the 1715 fleet on the East Coast, the divers themselves work for a ship captain, and the ship captain is a subcontractor under a company called Queen's Jewels, and Queen's Jewels owns the leases from the state of Florida. So it's all just a chain of command and a chain of ownership that is very well documented, very well monitored, and policed. So people know that it can be trusted. It goes back, in fact, to when the first salvage officially started happening in the 1960s with a company called Real 8 Company. And then it went through other ownership. Mel Fisher's company was a very big one for many years, until they sold to this Queen's Jewels company. And their duty, in addition to keeping all the records, is to provide a certificate. That is the number one way to authenticate an item from a shipwreck, is to have a certificate, a unique certificate, not just a photocopied thing, but a unique certificate for that item, that with a number and a database that certifies that particular piece. That's what everyone's looking for, and that's what's really, interestingly enough, that's driven the market. It's brought higher values for everything. Another Mel Fisher item that you hear about all the time, we even mentioned it with the ingots, is a Atocha, which was a wreck that Mel found in the 1980s off Key West. That was about a century earlier than the 1715 fleet, but that's a perfect example of these are coins that would normally sell for a couple $100 each, but they sell for a couple $1,000 each, simply because they have that certification saying that Mel Fisher's company salvaged it, has a unique number, has a photo, it's in a database, it's all clean. That's the way it works.
And what about sourcing these? I mean, as we discussed earlier, it'd be tough to do too many auctions because sourcing is an issue. So is your sourcing mostly coming from contacts that you know, or how do you get most of the artifacts that you put in your auction?
Yeah, it used to be that sourcing came directly from the shipwrecks, as you would think, but so little material is found today because there are so few active operations. And this is another avenue we can get into as to why that is. But very little comes directly from the salvage efforts today. Mostly what we are seeing are things that have already been on the market and have been residing in collections. I don't think it's any secret that Mel Fisher's company sells the material from the Atocha, but it may not be necessarily completely obvious to everybody that they are buying and selling in the market. I mean, they have to source material just as we do from the open market, because everything that was found has already found a home, and then it needs to find a home again when somebody dies or decides to sell, or perhaps just has seen that the market has risen so much that they want to cash in. It's a constantly cycling thing, and mostly we are chasing collections and not particular shipwrecks. Now, there are some exceptions. For example, my next auction in May probably will have a selection of material from a shipwreck off England that was salvaged a number of years ago, and a lot of the material has been on the market, but I've been put in touch with the main financer behind that shipwreck, and I hope to make some headway in getting him to sell what he has in our auction, and that would be fairly fresh from the shipwreck, basically, because it only went into his hands, and that was it.
Right. You've also mentioned government a couple of times, and so I was curious as to the impact of government, both the U.S. government as well as international, and are they more helpful or more of a hindrance, or is it dependent upon what government we're talking about?
No, unfortunately, it's a hindrance almost always. What we have in Florida is a nicely grandfathered in situation. And the people who actually do the work are, they understand that that's the system, and they work very well with it. But overall, just about any government in the world would lean toward an archaeological angle on everything. And that leads to the concept of cultural property. Now, where does that go? Because when you're talking about something being an item of cultural property, in other words, cultural significance to one particular group of people, well, is that significance to the country whose ship it was, the country of origin where the material was originally mined, for example, like silver, or is it the country whose shores it is? Because these are conflicting things. I've been in major cases around the world, like legal cases, where the argument that this was the big patrimony of this country just because everybody grew up in this country knowing that there was a shipwreck off their shores and that was their big thing. You can't take it away. Well, how do you compare that claim to the country that says, well, this was our ship that we lost hundreds of years ago. We've always wanted to have it back, and so it's ours. Well, you notice in all this discussion, I haven't talked at all about the biggest thing, which is the commercial outfit that it takes to salvage the stuff in the first place. And without that, nobody gets anything.
Right.
And that's something that seems to be lost on the government authorities these days. They're more concerned about preserving cultural property, not losing anything of cultural significance to their people, because it's embarrassing on a political basis to be, well, I was the governor or the president or whoever was responsible for letting all that stuff out of our hands. Bad, shame on me. That's what really drives it politically. And so what we see today, and it's not just shipwreck stuff. I've done a fairly good job of trying to keep that so clean that it doesn't really, it doesn't come up so much. But where we see problems are in ancient coins. And what I'm talking about with that, I mean, is crossing borders. Right now in the United States, we don't acknowledge the laws of other countries. In other words, their cultural property laws. But we have what are called memoranda of understanding or memorandums of understanding, MOUs, in which our State Department basically agrees with the country of origin in saying, look, okay, if you are laying claim to these coins because they are your cultural property and somebody tries to ship them in the United States, we will stop them and return them to you. Or if it's already in the United States, we will do our best effort to retrieve it and what they call repatriate. This is a bit of a problem because it's totally against any kind of laws that we have, but they found a way in, and we're working on trying to enforce it better so that it doesn't quite work the way it's working in effect now. But like I say, that is a big problem in that people who collect this material feel a little bit nervous about, well, is it legal for me to have this? And again, that's why it's so important to have a shipwreck item that is fully certified, fully vetted, fully signed off for by whatever governments. And, that's what we have in shipwrecks like Atocha and 1715 Fleet.
Yeah. So our podcast is called The Significance of Wealth. So let's shift a little bit there. What's the makeup of your typical buyer at this point? And directionally, I think where I'm going with this is as you're aware, I write a lot of content about collectibles and investing, and my personal passion is an overlay between the two. But I'm curious if I would assume certainly historically that most buyers have been collectors, but I would also guess that you're probably starting to see more and more people come in potentially as investors and not necessarily collector first. Would that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your customer base and the makeup. And
Fair statement. Yeah. I mean, historically, it was all about collectors. And I think that also made for a lower level. There was just kind of a lower, any old time collector will generally miss out on some key things today just because they said, well, that's not what it's worth. It should be worth a little bit less. Okay.
Yeah.
But they have to roll with the times, and the times now are such that anybody with money that is looking to invest I hate to use the term invest. I know it's important to you and your people, but for me, investment means more like, well, I don't care what it is, just put my money somewhere and make it earn. Whereas in my business, I'm more in tune with trying to make things more valuable by having people appreciate it. And what happens is it ends up being a good investment. So the savvy people, and this is to answer your question, is what we're seeing is wealthy people who have the time and the energy to take just a couple steps more, and the interest, obviously, to intelligently spend their money on items that are, for lack of a better term, cool. If you think it's cool, chances are someone else is going to think it's cool too. And what is in place today, and probably we can say that this wasn't the case years ago when it was just collectors, pure collectors. You have such a widespread availability of material online. So whereas it might be hard to find that second person who thinks your item is cool back in the day, today it's the easiest thing ever. You just put it up on eBay and say, look what I've got. And now you've got thousands of people interested. So it all has its limits, obviously, but it's definitely a different day now where, you buy with your heart. You may have investment in mind, but if you buy with your heart and you have good advice, you do very well. The advice part is obviously where we come in, and we advise people all the time, that this may look cool, but I can get you a better one, or this is neat, but it doesn't have clean provenance. You're better off, waiting for something that's better. Or you may not realize how good this thing is. Let me tell you, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand where you're coming from, regarding the investment versus the collectible. But, of course, I mean, I'm in the investment world, but I've also been a collector for many, many years. And, yeah, I think there is something to be said of having the passion for it. If you can have the passion for it, but also view it through the lens of an investment, which ironically I've done since I was a kid. I mean, when I used to mow a lawn, I'd get $10 and I'd say, okay, what baseball card am I going to buy with this $10? A, I want it to be a player that I want and like, but B, even at 10, 11 years old, my mindset was, what's going to be worth the most money down the road? And yeah, again, I think we're seeing a big change there. In fact, a lot of the conferences that I speak at regarding, collectibles really is a discussion of, in my view, that collectibles are becoming an alternative investment asset class. And I would have to think that would be the case with the items you work with as well.
Yeah, and I think that another difference that we're seeing, pre-internet, you would have boiler room operations, that be on TV or cold calling and saying, look, we have all these silver dollars. Aren't these neat? And they're rare and all this. And it was really, you have to really know what you're doing in order to really do well in any kind of investment like that. You certainly couldn't buy from one of these operations. You would lose your money all the time. There have even been TV shows about people buying Franklin Mint products and then realizing that they got taken. But yeah, it's a different day now because you can't get away with anything like that now. Everything is so transparent and so in your face all the time that anything really bad is drummed out very quickly. So you have to spend more money. That's the downside, but you can be a lot more comfortable about it. And I think that it's actually a much safer time now to be a collector and investor. If you collect.
Well, we're about to wrap up here, but and thank you again for being here. But what I'd love to hear from you in closing is number one, kind of what's your view on the future of your auction, and then secondly, for those in our audience that are interested, again, what are the dates of your upcoming auction, and is there a methodology where they can find you online or find out information about your auction?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll start with the second thing first, which is very easy. You go to sedwickcoins.com and
that's SEDWICK.
COINS.com. And from there, you will see links where you can get to our auction site, which is auction.sedwickcoins.com. And there you can see all the lots. If you go to our main web page, then you can see the catalog, and it's just like flipping through a printed catalog. The auction.sedwickcoins.com is the actual bidding site. When the auction goes live, that's where you'll see our auctioneer calling out, and it goes lot by lot. The date of the auction is November 7th and 8th, the 2 days. Prior to that, November 6th, we have, we do this every November. We bring in speakers, one of whom was you before, and about various topics, and they speak while we are doing lot viewing. So it's kind of a nice way to combine things. Certain buyers will need a day to go through and see the lots in person, and they can come in and out of the talks while they do that. And then we have a cocktail party afterward, and it's just a really nice event here in Winter Park. Now, are we going to keep doing this? Yes, of course. Are we going to make changes? Obviously. The biggest one is that we're moving to a new office in Maitland after this auction, so that in our May auction, which is typically internet only, we have a caller, but we don't have a floor with people in the room. We will have room at our own facility in our new office to do that. For November sales, we'll probably still keep having the venue in a hotel, but we're going to have more in-person floor auctions for both auctions that we do each year. And then from that, I would say it's just a numbers game. We're getting more and more bigger and better consignments. We're pushing the needle, as people like to say, in terms of moving the needle, I guess is the term, in terms of total amount that we sell in each auction. Our next milestone is $5 million, but someday we hope to be $10 million. And it's just a matter of the material and getting the material. So we just keep doing it and doing more of it.
Exciting stuff. And I certainly had a great time last year speaking at the auction, looking at the artifacts. Bought a couple. I don't think you can see it back here, but including a bronze cannonball, which is actually on the table directly behind me. So so it's fun stuff. Like I said, I truly enjoy it, and glad we're able to get together. Glad you were able to attend this podcast with us, and really appreciate it. And thanks again.
It's my pleasure.
On behalf of Tom Ruggie and Destiny Family Office, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Significance of Wealth and will continue to tune into future episodes. Connect with us at destinyfamilyoffice.com, on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Reddit, and recommend our podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Until next time. The expressed views, thoughts, and opinions in this episode of The Significance of Wealth belong solely to the host and/or guests and are not investment recommendations or offers to buy or sell securities or private investments by Destiny Wealth Partners or its affiliates. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. The funds discussed are typically for qualified purchasers, defined as $5 million of investment net worth, exclusive of primary residence.